Three different services will all tell you they solve the same problem. You send the URL, they hand back the page, and every proxy, browser, and retry that used to be your headache is suddenly someone else's. ScraperAPI, Zyte, and Bright Data Web Unlocker all sell that exact promise, and on their marketing pages, they look almost interchangeable. They are not. I put all three against the same hard targets on real jobs, and today I want to walk through what these APIs actually do, what they really cost, where each one wins, and when buying any of them beats building your own stack. I run my own proxy infrastructure and production scrapers, and I paid for all three of these out of pocket to write this, so it is a tested comparison and not a vendor roundup. I will be honest about where each one struggles, because they all struggle somewhere. None of these makes scraping undetectable. None of them makes anything legal that was not already legal, and I am not going to pretend otherwise. What they sell is convenience behind a single endpoint, and the whole question is whether that convenience earns its price on your job. What these APIs actually do. Start with what you are really renting, because the branding hides it. A managed scraping API is the infrastructure layer you would otherwise build wrapped behind one URL. You send a request, and on the other side it picks a proxy from a pool, spins up a headless browser if the page needs JavaScript, retries when a fetch fails, and hands you back finished HTML or parsed fields. You are not buying magic. You are paying someone else to run the proxy farm and the browser fleet, and everything below is about how differently these three do it. Boy, they look the same, but are not. On paper, all three read like the same paragraph. One endpoint, high success rates, handles the hard sides. Underneath, they sit on different foundations. ScraperAPI leans on a broad proxy pool with a simple credit model. Zyte pairs its API with a smart proxy layer that decides how hard to try per request. Web Unlocker sits on Bright Data's very large residential and mobile network, tuned for the sites that fight back hardest. Same promise on the label, three different machines behind it, the pricing shapes are the real difference. This is where people get surprised. The three do not even price the same unit. ScraperAPI mostly sells credits per request, and a request costs more credits when it needs rendering or premium proxies. Zyte bills closer to per successful request, so a failed attempt does not always cost you. Web Unlocker charges by successful request too, but its network is priced around bandwidth, so heavy pages cost more than light ones. That means the cheapest option flips depending on your target, and you cannot rank them on sticker price alone. This ScraperAPI is good at. ScraperAPI is the friendliest of the three to start with. The API is simple, the credit model is easy to reason about, and for static sites and moderately defended targets, it just works. You flip a render parameter when a page needs JavaScript, a country parameter when you need a region, and most of the time you get your HTML back. On my easy and medium targets, it cleared them at a high rate and stayed cheap. If your job is mostly ordinary sites, this is the gentlest way in. Where ScraperAPI struggled. Now the honest part. On my hardest target, the kind of site that throws a real challenge and watches behavior closely, its success rate dropped and the retries started eating credits. It did not fail outright, but the cost per successful page climbed enough that it stopped being the cheap option there. That is not a knock, it is a positioning fact. It is tuned to be affordable across the broad middle of the web, not to win a brawl with the 2 or 3 most defended sites you might care about. What Zyte is, Zyte comes at this from the data company angle. Its API is paired with a proxy layer that adjusts how aggressively it works a request, and it leans toward charging for results rather than attempts. That shape matters on a hard target, because a site that needs several tries per page will not silently multiply your bill the way a pure per request model can. It also carries more of a data platform around it, tooling for people who treat scraping as an ongoing operation rather than a one-off script. The Zyte trade-off. Where Zyte asks more of you is the learning curve and the way its costs behave under load. It is less of a flip-a-switch experience than ScraperAPI, and reasoning about what a job will cost takes more homework, because the per-success model interacts with how hard your targets are. On my tests, it held a strong success rate on the medium and hard sides and landed in the middle on cost, which is roughly where its whole design points. It is what I reach for when scraping is a standing part of the operation. What Bright Data Web Unlocker is. Web Unlocker is the specialist. It is not a general framework, it is an unblocking endpoint built on Bright Data's large residential and mobile network, aimed at the sites that beat everything cheaper. You hand it a URL, it works the problem behind the scenes, and it returns the page. on the single hardest target in my set. This is the one that cleared it most reliably, and by a clear margin. When a site has beaten your own stack and beaten the cheaper APIs, this is the tier that tends to still get through. The web unlocker catch, that capability is not free, and the bill can startle you because the network underneath is priced around bandwidth. A heavy page rendered through it costs real money, and the large crawl adds up fast. It is also not the quickest. The mistake people make is reaching for the strongest unblocker for their whole job, when only a handful of pages need it. Use the specialist where the specialist is required, and its price stays contained. How I actually tested this. Here is the method, because a comparison is only worth its test. I took the same targets, an easy static site, a medium JavaScript site, and one genuinely hard target, and ran a few thousand requests through each service against each. Then I measured the three things that matter: the real success rate on the hard target, the latency per return page, and the true cost per successful record rather than the advertised cost per request. Everything here comes out of those numbers, not a landing page. Success on the hard sites, on the easy and medium targets. All three cleared them at high rates, and the differences barely mattered. The hard target is where they separated. Web Unlocker cleared it most consistently. Zyte held a strong rate a step behind, and ScraperAPI came in lower and paid for it in retries. I want to be careful here because this is one target on one set of days, and success rates move as sites change their defenses. What does not move is the shape. The more specialized and expensive the tool, the better it did on the site that fought hardest. Speed is the number nobody puts on the marketing page, and it matters more than people expect. The harder a service works to get through a defended site, the longer each request tends to take, because more retries and a real browser cost seconds. In my runs, the simple fetches came back quickest, and the heavy unblocking calls on the hard target were noticeably slower per page. If you are pulling a large volume, that per page latency multiplies into hours. The strongest tool is often the slowest, and that is a real cost, not a footnote. Read what the request actually means. Before you trust any price, read the fine print on what one request even is, because this is where the bill hides. Some plans charge for failed attempts, so a hard target that needs several tries per page quietly multiplies your cost. Some charge extra for rendering, extra for premium proxies, extra for a specific country, and a bandwidth-priced service bills more for a heavy page than a light one, so the same request count can cost wildly different amounts. That is why I measure cost per successful record on my own target, not the number on the pricing page. Reliability and support are the real product. When you depend on a service, its reliability becomes your reliability, so weigh the boring signals. How often it goes down, how fast it recovers, and whether there is a real human to reach when a target stops returning data. The established platforms carry more support weight, and that is part of what you pay for, right up until your pipeline breaks on a Monday morning and you are alone with it. When buying one beats building, so when do I just pay? When the target is genuinely hard and would otherwise eat weeks of my time, letting a specialist absorb that fight is cheaper than staffing it. When the volume is modest, paying per request costs less than maintaining your own stack. And when time is the scarce thing, a service that works this afternoon beats a build that works in 3 weeks. If scraping is not the core of what you do, buying the boring part is usually the right trade. Yes, that. When your volume is large, per request or per bandwidth pricing turns brutal, and 10 million pages a month can cost more than a couple of servers and your own proxy pool. When you need full control over how each request is made, a black box fights you, and when your targets are simple, you are paying a premium you did not need. At real scale on ordinary targets, your own stack wins on cost, and the proxy layer decides whether it works. The hybrid that usually wins. In practice, it is rarely all or nothing, and the smartest setup is a mix. Build your own stack for the bulk of your volume on the easy and medium targets where you control the cost, and buy the strongest unblocker only for the handful of genuinely hard sites that would otherwise eat your time. That way you pay the premium exactly where it earns its keep and stay cheap everywhere else. I run this split myself, my own mobile proxies on real carrier SIM cards for the predictable heavy lifting, a specialist API in reserve for the sites that fight back hardest. The honest limits, let me be straight about the boundaries, because no endpoint changes them. None of these three makes anything undetectable, whatever the landing page implies, and none of them makes it legal to collect data that was never yours to collect. The same rules apply. Public data, the robots file respected, an official API or bulk feed preferred where one exists. A polite rate held, a service absorbs the infrastructure work, but not the responsibility for what you scrape. I run both sides of this in production, my own stack and these APIs on real jobs, so this is a tested comparison and not theory. If you want the full versions, the honest reviews with the measured success rates, the latency numbers, and the cost per record math, plus the picks I actually use, they are at dataresearchtools.com, tested on real targets with no undetectable promises. So to recap, all three rent you the proxy, browser, and retry infrastructure behind one endpoint, but they price different units, so the cheapest one flips with your target. ScraperAPI is the easy, affordable start for ordinary sites. Zyte is the middle ground for scraping as a standing operation. And Web Unlocker is the specialist for the sites that beat everything else. Slower and pricier for it. Test on your own hard target. Measure cost per successful record and latency. Buy for the hard handful and build for the bulk. Subscribe for a new scraping infrastructure breakdown. And I'll see you in the next one.